having their voices heard is a big issue, that in every society, making sure that 50% of the population or more actually get heard at least 50% of the time is quite difficult. And there are few examples, though they do exist, where women are represented in positions of power in parliaments and so on in equal measure. Secondly, I think the problems of balance, because women are expected and often want to be the primary carer of children or increasingly of older people. This is a big issue that I think faces many countries. And that also has, therefore, its consequences, particularly on women. And then thirdly, economic strength, that ensuring that women are able to get the economic strength. They still tend to be paid less, they still tend to have fewer opportunities to start their own business, to own wealth and so on. To be successful as a nation, it doesn't make any sense to fail to utilise some of the greatest expertise in your population. You can make very, very strong economic arguments for women being part of the workforce and leading companies and becoming decision makers, even if you don't agree with it on any other basis. It doesn't make any economic sense to leave 50% of your population unable to contribute when amongst them will be great minds and real entrepreneurs. The difficulty is that many organisations set up frameworks that by definition, without meaning to, but by definition, make it harder for women to engage and to grow. So, for example, if you rely heavily on years of experience for promotion, women are less likely to have continuous records of work because they are more likely to have taken time off, and also because they're more likely than men to have followed their partner if their partner has moved jobs. So too, when you choose the point at which people can get promotion, you have to think about the fact that women make decisions about children and childbirth at certain points in their lives, and that's likely to be, or could be, times when those promotion prospects are most real. Having said all that, it's not the only issue, because as you look at women in organisations, there are women who don't have children, there are women who don't have partners, who still find that it's harder to get through the glass ceiling, as we call it sometimes. So you have to then look at how organisations operate in terms of what I call appointment in your own image. And that's about the fact that we all tend towards looking for our successors or people to work with whom we feel comfortable. And comfortable equals looks like me, or feels like me, or sounds like me. And people who are different, therefore, I think find it harder. And that means you have to think very, very carefully about how you organise, how you promote, how you appoint. When I became High Representative in the EU, there were very few women who were leading our delegations across the world. I think only a handful. By the time I left, I think there were over 40. And the reason for that was a combination of different things. But when I interviewed women, sometimes you would hear them say, I wasn't going to apply, but when I saw that it was you, because you're a woman, I felt I could. They knew that I would interview them. They felt they would get a fair hearing. They didn't necessarily think that I would just appoint them, which I certainly didn't just for that reason. But they really did feel that perhaps this organisation was an organisation that they could belong to. And that's never to be underestimated. If you are looking at an organisation and you see that it doesn't have people that look like you in it, you don't think that that's where you belong. It's partly about, do you look like the person they think? And it was also tied into a whole set of domestic issues that were going on, an anti-European agenda, therefore you are the person they focus on to represent what they don't like, an anti-Labour Party agenda, and so on. There are a whole raft of different things. Some of it I never really understood, if in truth. I think it just gained a momentum of its own. And a lot of it I never read. But I decided quite early on, the only way you could prove that you could do the job was to do it. And you could spend a lot of your life in trying to talk to journalists about theoretical ideas, when they had a deadline to fill and an editorial view, and when they didn't know you anyway. And so I didn't do a lot of that, but I did try and find ways in which I could show that I did things. And the press turned round, and by the end, you know, not everyone would agree with everything I did, and rightly so, and I don't expect them to fail to criticise what they felt could have been done better. But I think there was an acknowledgement that actually, given all that had to be done and the flow of difficult and challenging circumstances we dealt with, that it was okay. I certainly can remember that journalists were very interested in the fact that I had a family, which I'm not sure they'd have been so interested in if I'd been a guy. I certainly think that there's an expectation that women will behave differently and therefore maybe not as effectively. I don't know. It's really hard to say. When asked the question, you know, are women better at something or worse? The answer is I don't know, because there aren't enough of us doing it to know. So whether if I'd been a man, I'd have had a rough press as well, probably. Would it have been different? Well, probably. But that's also because your target's different. You know, the person is different. So it's difficult to know. I think generally, for women in public life, both here and in Europe, it is tougher. And it's often the case that if women do something where they're seen to put their family first, that's a criticised position. If a man does it, it's a praised position.